Hi, this is David. I am your friendly neighborhood astrologer at cosmiccontext.com, and this is your astrological forecast for November 2019. So, we have all been enjoying a nice year of Jupiter and Sagittarius expanding our vision, um, probably bringing us visions for what we want to create in our lives and in the world and in our communities. And that period, that transit of Jupiter in Sagittarius is sadly coming to a close, or it will be at the end of November. But thankfully, we do have one more lovely month of that, and I think there's something really interesting about this upcoming month that is sort of going to help us really take advantage of that Jupiterian energy and draw it forward into all our endeavors in the next year. So that's sort of what I want to talk to you about. A little more context: we just passed through a Sun Uranus conjunction on the new moon on October 27th on this past Sunday. So there might have been some serious shakeups in your world. I would not be surprised. It is not off schedule if there have been some major shakeups in your life recently. And those major shakeups have sort of been clearing the ground for some big shifts that are going to happen, including Jupiter moving into Capricorn, and this upcoming Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, which is really sort of the focus of this month, besides it being Jupiter's last month in Sagittarius until for the next 12 years. So Mercury retrograde, I'll refer you to the rest of the internet for the basics on Mercury retrograde. But I think most of what you see there is pretty much true. That's communication snafus, lost items. Be careful signing contracts. I would not necessarily buy a house during a Mercury retrograde. It really isn't the end of the world. It's just kind of more annoying than tragic, but tends to be. This Mercury retrograde is kind of special though, because it's in Scorpio. It's in Scorpio the whole time. And so first of all, it goes it goes retrograde conjunct Venus on Halloween. And I think that Venus conjunction at the beginning of that retrograde alerts us that this is this might be kind of relationship focused. It might have a lot to do with your relationship with others, as well as potentially with yourself. Because Scorpio relates in general to our desires. And when I say desires, that's more than just our wants. It's not like, I want this for Christmas, or I want this or that. Our desires are sort of the deep emotional commitments that drive us, that drive our whole lives, and oftentimes drive us to act in ways that we're not conscious of, maybe what's driving us. So Mercury going retrograde in Scorpio is really inviting us to become more aware of those deep desires. Why do we want to clarify our desires? Because when we're not clear about what our desires are, about what's driving us, we're usually not very good at achieving our desires. And plus, they can come out sideways. They can come out as manipulation or bullying, codependence, addiction. These are things that happen when we have desires, and maybe it's like a desire for acceptance or a desire for safety, but we think we can satisfy that like with a cookie, or with a pat on the back from some kind of social approval that isn't that deep. and we don't really think that we can satisfy them that way. That's the thing, is it's beneath the level of thought, and Mercury in Scorpio going retrograde is asking us to look at that stuff. You know, and sometimes we desire certain responses from other people. We want people to respond to us in a certain way. Maybe, you know, I say I love you, and I want to hear I love you back. Maybe that's why I said I love you. And when we do that, we're manipulating people. We're not treating them as the full free-willed human beings that they are. We're treating them as machines that we can push their buttons and then get a certain response back. And that's one way that these desires can come out sideways. And Mercury retrograde in Scorpio is asking us to take a look at those patterns too. Because if we could be clear about what we wanted from someone else, maybe we could just ask for it. Just ask, like, I need some comfort right now, or whatever it is. And B, maybe we would realize that it's not something that's in our power to get. You know, that what other people give us, the way other people relate to us, that's in their power. It's not in our power. And when we're not clear on that, then we tend to manipulate other people. And when other people obviously aren't clear on that, they tend to try to manipulate us. And us not being clear on it makes us more manipulable, as well as more prone to try and manipulate other people. So this month, we really have a golden opportunity to look at some of those patterns and try to break free of some of those patterns. And it really is break free, because we're talking about freedom. We're talking about free will, allowing other people their own free will by not manipulating them, not bullying them, not and allowing ourselves our own free will by not giving into addictions and things like this. You know, so that's the opportunity we have this month. You know, because our drives, our emotions sort of drive us, and we can give those drives a tune up if we see them clearly for what they are. Okay, so the blow by blow. Mercury goes retrograde on Halloween, and it's conjunct Venus, as I mentioned, which is spooky as hell. And then November 2nd, Venus goes into Sagittarius. She skips out of Scorpio, goes into Sagittarius to go party with Jupiter. And, you know, it's almost like she knows that things are about to get a little bit heavy, with Mercury wanting to all of a sudden have all these deep thoughts about what's really going on in these deep conversations, and she kind of wants to go party. And that makes me think that this month of Mercury retrograde in Scorpio is more of an internal thing, maybe, I mean, there might be some really deep conversations that get had, and that's really awesome. But I think for the most part, this is on us individually, to really dive into, like, what's going on in me. So after that first weekend, Mars creeps up to 20 Libra, at which point he is squaring Pluto, and he's already been squaring Saturn. So if you've been feeling a little bit like driving with the parking brakes on, not feeling like you want to drive with the parking brakes on, but feeling like that's what's been happening, that's because it is. Mars has been squaring Saturn for the past week, which is at like 15 Capricorn, and now that first weekend he's going to start squaring Pluto. Which is kind of just a caution to watch what you say, what you do, watch your triggers. That's kind of the theme of the whole month, is watch your triggers. But especially with Mars in Libra, it's especially maybe things that are driven by social indignation. You might think you have the upper hand, but if you let yourself get, you know, sort of morally speaking, but if you let yourself get sort of blown into a tizzy about things, you could lose that upper hand pretty quickly. Um, Another thing with Mars squared Pluto, just watch your aggression in general, and especially with Mercury retrograde going on. Just be really careful on the road. Really, really careful driving. Drive defensively. There could be some pretty crazy drivers out there that are both being way too aggressive and completely not paying attention. So watch out for that. Um, but I think in general, seeing our own power plays and seeing the power plays sort of that might be on display during that time, I'm sure there'll be some interesting stuff in the news. It's gonna give us more food for thought for this Mercury retrograde. Um, so one interesting spot in this Mercury retrograde. So it went retrograde on Halloween, and then there's going to be what's called a Cazimi on Monday, November 11th in the morning. And so Cazimi is known as the heart of the sun. That's when Mercury retrogrades backwards and the sun is moving forwards in the zodiac, and they are completely together within 17 arc minutes of each other. That's known as Cazimi, and it's just it's a really potent time for Mercury, and there could be some really amazing insights that come up, especially about what we've been talking about, these emotional commitments, these drives. So be open to those insights. It's a great time for any kind of writing that you do. If you have a writing practice, I would definitely not do it that morning. um, so that's that morning, Monday morning, November 11th, and then the full moon. There's a full moon the next day on Tuesday morning. That's when it goes exact on Mountain Time. So it's at 6:34 a.m. Mountain Time. So Eastern Time would be 2 hours ahead of that, and Pacific Time would be an hour behind that. Central Time would be an hour ahead of that. But anyway, there's a full moon early in the morning on Tuesday, and that's going to be a really interesting full moon because it's the moon's in Taurus, so it's super grounding. We've been doing all of this like emotional stuff, and then we get this full moon in Taurus, and it's really, really grounding. And I think the interesting thing about that is we were talking about clarifying our desires to the point where we know if what we really need in that moment is security, that we know we're not going to reach for a cookie necessarily. And I think the thing about that full moon in Taurus is that can ground us to the point where if you feel that grounding in the earth, that you already have everything you need right there. You know when you're grounded that there's nothing really missing. And that's an important feeling to have. It's not that feeling is going to last all month necessarily, although it could if you really do a good grounding on that full moon, like a nice grounding ritual. It doesn't have to be a ritual, it just could be like a meditation or anything. But if you really lie, and literally lie on the ground, feel it's like a good shavasana from a yoga class, where you feel the continuity between your body and the earth, and you feel that gravity. You feel like the earth holding you. That gravity is actually like the earth holding us, not letting us go. That feeling can give you so much of what you need, what we're so often searching for in sideways ways. And so I think it would be really lovely to really take advantage of that full moon, get some nice grounding, and that can help with the rest of the month. Some other things about that full moon are that So Mars in Libra will be sextile Jupiter in Sagittarius, that's pretty exuberant, which combined with that grounding, that could be pretty good for some like pretty energetic action. Although Mars still is in Libra, so Mars in Libra, Mars is in his detriment in Libra. That's because he's always considering what he wants to do. He's more excited about maybe ideas than doing things. But that's really part of this process, I think, of clarifying your desire, that we're involved with this Mercury retrograde. And the promise of that depth of awareness, that depth of awareness would lead to being more effective when you're really connected to what it is that drives you, and you really know what it is, then you can just go for it. And sidebar, that relates there's this traditional image, three-part image of Scorpio, and it describes three different sort of levels of, you could say, levels of consciousness of Scorpio. And one level is the scorpion. And you think of a scorpion, and it's kind of like a bug. It just sort of doesn't have a lot of free will. It just, it encounters some kind of stimuli and it just stings, right? It just like automatically reacts. And I think we all know people like that whatever their trigger is, like they just wound, they just sting. And it's an automatic process. And like from the outside, you look at it and you're like, I knew exactly what you were going to do because I've seen you do it a million times and it's never any different. There's no creativity in it, it's just automatic. So that's one level of Scorpio. It describes someone who's really driven by their desires in this kind of automatic way. And then the next level above that is the snake. And the snake is an image of, I guess, a kind of consciousness that's a little bit more aware, that's not just gonna like automatically respond to stimuli all the time. It might be a little more crafty, might do a little more hiding. It might have like fake eyes on the back of its head to trick you. It might be a little bit manipulative, but it's still driven by its, by these desires that it's not fully aware of. And I think that's where most of us are. That honestly, that's most of us are partially at least driven by desires that we're not completely on top of. And what we are being invited to do this month by Mercury and Scorpio going retrograde is we're invited to become more aware of those desires, which would lead us to the next level of Scorpio, which is the eagle. So the eagle, flies high above the ground, and that air that it's aloft on, that it's flying on, is the air of truth. It's the truth of its desires, the truth of being clear on what it's going for and why, and not being driven in these sideways directions by lying to itself about what it's going for. So that's what we can become. We can become the eagle this month. And I think that's really important because we have this vision from Jupiter, from this last year of Jupiter and Sagittarius. I would imagine most of us, we have this vision now for what we want to make with our lives and what we want to make with our worlds. And yet we know we might be a little scared of what's going to happen when Jupiter leaves Sagittarius, because we know that we can have, an idea of what we're going to do, but that's not necessarily what ends up getting done. And what ends up getting done is what we're emotionally committed to, right? So we might have the idea that we want to go to the gym every day, but what we might be emotionally committed to is sleeping in every day. And what's going to happen is what we're emotionally committed to, not the big ideas that we have. But if we can clarify what it is we're emotionally committed to, we might be able to align what that is with our vision. And that's what this month is about. So there's this really interesting thing that happens. I think the next interesting thing that happens after that full moon is Mars ingresses Scorpio on Tuesday, November 19th. So Mars will be there in his home sign, one of his home signs, together with the Sun and with Mercury. And Mars in Scorpio is just like a coiled spring. Again, all this Scorpio stuff is below the level of conscious thought. But if we've been doing all this Mercury work to become aware of what's driving us, if we become aware of that, then we can become aware of how this coiled spring is working. And so it's below the level of conscious thought, but we can become aware of it with all this Mercury retrograde. And then Mercury retrograde, or Mercury goes direct on the very next day, on November 20th, Wednesday, and Thursday, November 21st. Mercury stations direct. So that's always a point where you can look for more insights. Look for those insights on those days of what it is that drives you. And just again, what's really driving you. Not what you would like to be driving you, not what your like mission statement that you made up one day for yourself is. This is below the level of words. It's a feeling. So what drives you? And it's when it stations direct there, it's sextile the moon in Virgo that day, both those days, and Saturn in Capricorn. Both of those are sextiling that Mercury. So both of those planets, and those earth signs, kind of want to see what's the practical point of all of this. So you kind of have an opportunity there to see if all of this reflection that you've been doing is yielding some fruit. And one way that you might see that is if you're able to sort of understand and maybe direct a little bit more your that Mars in Scorpio, to see if like on those days, November 20th and 21st, to see if maybe your action can have a little bit more power than it did before, because it's a little bit more grounded in your true desires. So the Sun then ingresses Sagittarius on Friday, November 22nd. So that's exciting. That's going to bring a little bit more light to that Sagittarius for one last final bang. We're going to get a little bit of exuberant Christmas season, beginning, that sort of week of Halloween, of Thanksgiving, and that'll be exciting, so get your jolly in now, because Jupiter's moving into Capricorn in the first couple of days of November. So yeah, I think the Christmas season is really in November this year. And then there is another new moon in Sagittarius, this time on Tuesday, November 26th at 8:05 a.m. MST. So what's interesting about that new moon is Venus has now just left Sagittarius. And Jupiter's there for another like week, but he's about to leave too. So we've got a new moon in Sagittarius. Jupiter's still just barely there. Venus has just left, and but there really just is this feeling, I think, of it's a last sort of explosion's not the right word, but it's a last sort of burning of this vision. And it might be a kind of a saying goodbye, a kind of a like moving on, where we're really starting to think about, okay, this is the end now of Jupiter in Sagittarius, and what is going to happen to this vision? Was it just a pipe dream? Or was it true? And the thing is, Jupiter can't always be in Sagittarius. But the truth is always true. So if the vision was true, it's gonna work. It's gonna be able to maintain itself if it's based on truth. You know, if it's based on just like a lot of hype and hoopla, probably not so much. But that's what we've been asked to do this month. What we're being asked to do in November is to really dig down to like, okay, beyond the hype and hoopla though, what is really true? What can I really do? What are my true desires? And what is the truth of this vision? Because, you know, and I wouldn't tell anyone to not, you know, not start your vision now. I mean, hopefully you've already started some things, and maybe if you haven't, like this month would be a great time to do it. But you know, if you are like, I'm gonna build a house with Jupiter and Sagittarius, and you like lay down the first rock so that the house will have, you know, the Jupiter and Sagittarius chart. You lay down that first rock and then you don't do any more. Like, obviously, that's not how this works. Like, Jupiter and Sagittarius isn't going to come build the rest of the house for you. You have to do it yourself. And it's unlikely that, you know, a group of workmen will show up after you do that being like, we really feel like building a house, but we don't need to get paid. Do you know of anything? And be like, oh yeah, I just put this rock here. That's the first rock. Keep going. You know, that's not really how it works. So whatever you envisioned during this Jupiter and Sagittarius time, you were always going to have to build. And probably that building was going to extend into the future when Jupiter wouldn't be in Sagittarius, which is the future that we're now entering into, or will be in December. But if we really clarify our desires, that Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, really understanding what's driving us, looking at it, going deeper, going deeper, going deeper, and then use that new moon to align our desires with our vision, and to check the truth of our vision. We'll be able to carry that vision forward. So thank you for listening. This has been your monthly astrological forecast for the month of November. I am David Ames. I'm an astrologer, and I offer readings. So if you're interested, you can go to my website at cosmiccontext.com. That's a lot of C's, cosmiccontext.com. And you can book a reading with me, or if you're, I'd love to hear what you are going through and how this month is treating you, or what you think about any of this. So feel free to comment on the YouTube page here, and I will respond. I'll try to respond to all the comments. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.